Hi everyone, and welcome to our panel, which is being delivered as part of INWED. INWED is the world's biggest initiative to celebrate the achievements of women in engineering and allied roles across our sector. This session is being hosted by ECITB, our organisation's support with attracting, developing and qualifying engineering construction workers. We invest around £25 million an annum in this process, and INWED is especially important to us because delivering diversity and highly skilled workforces is a core part of our vision. As part of this mission, we recognise the importance of the contribution of women, particularly to the engineering sector, and particularly in relation to INWED, their contribution to the lives and livelihoods of people globally. So the title of this session is Reflecting on an Unfinished Journey, and I think in its title we recognise that there's been progress in terms of women in engineering and construction and engineering generally, but there's also a long way to go. And I think as part of our panel today we'll discuss some of the progress that's been made, but equally some of the challenges that we still need to solve, and hopefully get onto some ideas about how we might do that and solve some of these issues. So most importantly, I'd like to introduce you to our panel that hopefully reflect a really diverse range of views across this issue from across our sector and wider. So what I'm going to do is ask each panelist in turn to introduce themselves, their role, and also why they're interested in women in engineering, what brought them around this table today in terms of this discussion. So I'm going to choose no particular order, and I'm going to start with Chi. Do you want to introduce yourself to start off?
Hello, hi everyone. So my name's Chi. I am actually an assistant engineer in Kent in the offshore structures team. So I'm currently designing anything to do with offshore structures. I'm also part of the Innovate team, which is the Early Careers Network organised by ECITB. What brought me here today is particularly there's less of a representation in terms of women in engineering, specifically in my discipline. In my office, there are quite a few, there's a few people that are actually women and empowered to do engineering if they're not analysts within our team. So I'm really kind of keen to get the discourse going and see what we can do to represent us as much as possible.
That's great. Thank you very much, Chi. You're very welcome. Let's go to Chris Claydon next.
Thanks, Becky, and hello, my name's Chris Claydon. I'm the Chief Executive of the ECITB. I'm here because this is an intrinsic part of our strategy as to how we broaden participation in engineering. You know, women and other groups are woefully underrepresented in an area which needs that input. You know, one of my role models in terms of who do I think of as great engineers, because I started my life off in the military and I have a background in aviation in the military, is Beatrice Schilling, who was played a really crucial part, funnily enough, in the Second World War in detecting and in repairing a critical fault in the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, which helped, you know, keep the country going in what was a really difficult time. So, you know, the role of women in engineering is absolutely paramount. We need more people in engineering. We need more women in engineering. We've got a very tight labour market ahead of us, and we've got a really interesting programme ahead of us of building the country towards net zero. And I think this is something which hopefully will appeal, but is critical.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. Let's hand over to Nikkei now.
Hi, my name is Folayan, as you've already said. I am an engineer and I work for a company called WSP. I work as a technical director for a team of telecommunications engineers in the UK and India. I'm the co-founder and chair of the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers, which champions inclusion of underrepresented groups with a special emphasis on Black and minority ethnic engineers across the UK. The ultimate goal is to encourage the inclusion message and the message of intersectionality within the engineering sector. And while I'm here, one, I'm a woman in engineering, and I seem to think that I know most of the women in engineering, which is still not good enough. There's only 16.5% of us, and it's taken even, I mean, the last numbers were in, I think was 2010, and it's taken, and that was at 9%, I think, at the time, and it's taken so many years to get to 16.5. And whilst that's encouraging, I think there's so much more that we could be doing to influence change and make a difference. And I'd like to leave the industry thinking that we are making progress in that direction.
That's brilliant. And I think the intersectionality issue is really important to this discussion. I think there's a lot of commonality around some of the things that we can do, irrespective of who we're trying to include, that transfers across all aspects of diversity. And I'm sure that will come out in our discussion. Well, welcome. Thanks very much. Matt, let's go to you.
Hi, so I'm Matt Parker. I'm the Campaigns and Events Manager for the ECITB, and I'm also the Secretary to IDEA, which is our ED&I task force. It's a tricky one in terms of actually why I want to be involved. I think the best way to quantify it is I've been fortunate, particularly since joining the ECITB, to be surrounded by a number of individuals that have spent their professional working lives trying to shift that status quo, which has really sort of raised my awareness of it. And it's hard not to be inspired by that, particularly when you realize that equity to them hasn't always meant and doesn't still mean what it means to me. So yeah, that's probably a good a reason as any as to why, or anyone should want to be involved in this, but yeah, me particularly.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. Let's go to Chloe next.
Hi, so I'm Chloe Sales, also known as Chloe the Welder. I really enjoy doing what I'm doing, and I'm really big on encouraging more girls into the industry. I'm here today because it took me 2 years to meet another female welder. I know that times are changing now and there's a lot more, but like it's already been said, there's a lot more we can do. So being given a platform to speak truthfully and honestly about your experiences and why so many other girls would love the industry.
That's fantastic, Chloe. I'm looking forward to hearing about your experiences in your career to date. And Jenny, let's go to you.
Hi, thanks, Becky. So I'm Jenny Young. I'm the Deputy Director of Strategy and Policy at ECITB. As part of that role, I hold the leadership accountability for our diversity and inclusion action. I'm an engineer by background. I'm a systems engineer, so my career has been a mix of industry, working in a professional body with a specific role for responsibility for increasing diversity and inclusion across engineering, and then joining ECITB 5 years ago. I think my interest and reason for being here today, aside from that it's part of my job, is that one, we have specific responsibilities placed on us by the Department for Education, that we're an arm's length body under the Department for Education. But I think more than that, as Chris said, the industry is at a really exciting time, and there is such an imperative to ensure that the opportunities that engineering and engineering construction presents to individuals who are involved in that industry. I think that's that imperative to open up those opportunities to as many people as possible, whether new entrants or returners or transferees, is a real challenge that we have to rise to. And the other thing I would say is that if I reflect back on my career, particularly looking back in my the bulk of it, which was spent in the aerospace and defence industry, I think I was really fortunate that being a female engineer was never a barrier. I was surrounded by quite a number of senior female engineers from an early age. So I've come to the realization later that not all engineering environments are like that by any stretch. And I think trying to take action to encourage the change is really important.
That's great. Thanks, Jenny. And I suppose I should just finish off the introduction. So I'm Becky Pleasant. I also work at ECITB as the Inclusivity Task Force champion, and also have a role with the nuclear sector in terms of encouraging diversity and skills more broadly. And I think that's probably why I'm here, that I recognise there's a significant challenge for skills going forward, and at the moment we're massively limiting our pool of potential applicants through one way or another in terms of what we're doing. I think also as a parent, I just recognised recently that I've completely failed in my own personal mission. I have 4 children, all are quite sciencey, and guess what? The boy is an engineer and the other 3 have gone into healthcare. So I think there's something I've done wrong, which I want to learn from in today's panel as well. Great. Okay, let's crack on with some questions. There's a number of panelists, so we probably won't literally go around the table for each question. So I'll point at some, but feel free if you've got something to say to use the raise hand function, and I'll bring you in if you've got something to say particularly. So what I'd like to do is to cast our minds back to the start of our careers. For some of us, that's longer ago than others, but I'd like you just to think through what inspired you to think about engineering. What was some of the opportunities that that engineering presented to you when you were starting off on that journey, whether you are an engineer or not? What did you know about engineering, and particularly females' role in engineering right back then when you started your career? So let me start off with Chi to start us off with that discussion. You've probably got a particular perspective you raised in your introduction, so let's explore that in a little bit more detail.
So what encouraged me is actually pretty funny. I went to Legoland and I saw that people had constructed these things, and I saw the rides, and I saw how physics was applied, and I got really excited. And being from having an artistic background, so being very good at structures and design, as well as maths and physics, made me think, oh, okay, so this might work. And then I read a book by Henry Petrotsky, which basically is To Engineer is Human. And it got me thinking about what an engineer is and what it means to engineer. And so I thought, yeah, I think this is very much me, or architecture. But the fact that I like maths so much means I probably need more engineering. So I actually went on a site visit. My dad is in oil and gas back in Nigeria, and he told me to come on site and see whether I like it. It was very typical African chief, let's do this, you're going to see this. And I got very excited again. I was just like, but there are no females here. What's going on, Dad? Like, why aren't there enough females on deck? I'm not seeing anyone with a hard hat. Like, this is really unusual. And he's like, don't worry, you can do this, Chi. And so I think that's probably what kind of inspired my trajectory, as well as knowing that there were few men. I felt that was a great challenge. I really do want to do this. I enjoy this thoroughly. I enjoy using maths, and I enjoy seeing the structures that I've built as evidence of what I have, what I've constructed. I think seeing the finished product and seeing all these designs around the world made me think, okay, this is something that I would really love to do. I love seeing that people are safe and comfortable in the structures I built. I love communicating with clients to get that finished product, and understanding that there are different constraints. And so that's how I really went into engineering. I saw pretty buildings, I saw Legoland, and I went on deck and decided this is exactly where I need to be. It was a bit unnerving to see that there were few female engineers, but at the same time, I thought this is a great challenge. And seeing kind of engineers that are more so in NASA or watching Hidden Figures, which is an incredible story, by the way, everyone should watch it, made me consider, wow, there is an opportunity for women all over the world to engineer, because it is human. So I think that's me kind of in a nutshell. And when I got to university, I went to Warwick to do civil engineering. I was given the opportunity to do different site visits. And before I specialized in civil engineering and structures, I had seen different disciplines within engineering, and then made a judgment to say, this is this speciality, and this is how I want to impact my community later. Because I very much believe that the role that you're in should somehow improve and impact your community. And so I thought, yes, I really do enjoy building structures. I really do know that I'm part of the sustainability force, whether it's oil and gas or offshore wind. And so, yes, this was the correct route to go down. I don't think I would have done anything else. I also feel like having a background in, I also went to the Netherlands for a year, which was very constructive as well, seeing how there are actually more female engineers working in this small Dutch company, and they were so excited by it. Got me thinking, wow, I really do want to be a design engineer. I really want to be a technical director in the future. This is the kind of paved way to success that I'm looking at. And seeing that other European countries have so much respect for engineering as a discipline, and especially female engineers, made me think, okay, this is definitely the right space to be in.
That's great. So you've raised there a couple of issues. So the role of a supportive parent, the role of some kind of experiences of good practice in other countries, and then a sort of personal desire to give back, I guess, somehow through your profession. Let's move on to Chloe now. You know, you've already raised the fact that it's unusual still to be a female welder. What took you down that particular path, Chloe, and what were the influences in your journey?
Honestly, it was really random. So I had no background at all in engineering. I found myself at some crossroads just before I was 22. I was applying for a load of jobs, and the first one that came up was warehouse operative. And there I learned that they were short on welders. So I asked to have a go. It looked really interesting. I was quite good. So I was going to put myself on a course, so I knew what was going on. I knew that I was sticking things together, but I didn't understand the science behind it. And then my work got back to me and said they'll put me on an apprenticeship. And I was the first female that Stoke-on-Trent College ever trained as a welding apprentice. So that kind of really highlighted to me that maybe I'm doing the right thing to kind of not like set the path, but just show that there are females that do this job. I did win STEM Apprentice of the Year, which was really shocking because I wasn't the best student at school. So everything completely changed when I started welding. It really opened my eyes to a lot of different ventures as well that I could go down. But my main concern is just highlighting that there are jobs out there that you can succeed in, not by going to university or just certain routes that were laid down for education. I didn't really have an influence in this job, so it's kind of a strange subject when people ask me, oh, who showed you this? And nobody. Like I did it myself. I was obviously a bit scared at the time because I'd never done it. I didn't know 6 months down the line if I'd still be enjoying it, but it's been 5 years almost now. Loads of different things have changed. I've had complete crazy opportunities come my way. And one of the biggest things that'll stick out for me is you don't see yourself the way other people do. So I nominated myself as a bit of a joke for an award with the IET in London. And I actually made a list. So I was invited down. And it really just proved to me that no matter what you think, or if you think that you're struggling with something, just keep doing what you're doing. And if you fail, fantastic, try again. So I used to really let my failures and struggles put me off, but with engineering, I'm learning every single day. And I love that. I love challenging myself. I love breaking barriers, breaking the mold, and just being myself, which is apparently different to the norm. But equality is becoming more quality now within certain industries. But it was 2 years before I worked with another girl. So I know things are changing, but it's just great to be able to speak about it with some amazing people.
That's a fantastic story, Chloe, really. I mean, I think, you know, it just shows there's two different routes there, you know, some with influence, some without, some accidental, some more planned, and yet both have led to hopefully really successful outcomes for both of you. Well, just a little bit, I'm just being nosy now. What was your experience like being the first female trainee? Was it difficult? Did you find it odd?
I think the only thing that was difficult for me not so much anymore now because I've changed my views on things, but just the stereotypes that you get thrown at you just for doing something different. Obviously, I've been supported so much, but there is also a flip side to that as well. And it's really hard not to let like negativity in, but I'm focusing on what I'm doing, and I think everybody else should kind of be like that. If you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say it.
I think those are very wise words. Let's go to Chris. You mentioned a particular influence in terms of your career in terms of engineering. What was your perception of female engineers when you started out on your journey? Did it seem, could you recognize the difference between men and women's opportunity?
Oh, it's such a big difference. I mean, it just wasn't there when I started my career. I mean, the military was very male orientated, and the change was profound. When I started, we didn't have female engineers in our engineering setups. For the aircraft engineers, we didn't have female pilots, and in the time I've been there, I've seen a really big change. And I saw that transition, and I learned along with that transition because I had a lot of learning to do as a result. So I can't give you a personal experience from me, I either as an engineer. But what I have seen is how it's changed. I've seen the mistakes made and how to avoid mistakes. Well, at least now how we can help avoid mistakes, but also the positive impact it had on delivering operational efficiency. So when I can, come to this organization and say, very happily to companies about the positive impact it makes on getting a much better representative workforce. I've seen it for real. I've seen it, tested under combat operations as well. And I can be very, straight on that. It really does make a positive difference to how we work and how we operate. So to me, it's vital for so many reasons. It's the right thing is one of the reasons. We need to increase the number of women into engineering, but it's right because we need the workforce. It's right because it makes us a better organization, or a better industry, I should say. So so my journey has been one of more of observation to date, but now it's more of participation and encouraging and supporting, and that's where I see my role.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to another question, and this I want to look at a little bit around whether enough is being done to encourage women into engineering, and what the challenges and barriers to doing more are in this space. Nikkei, I'd like to start off with you. Obviously, you've got some practical experiences in both of your roles in this space. Do you think enough's being done, and what could we do better?
Thanks for that question. I think enough. I don't think so. The reason why I don't think so is because I think, was it back in 2017, 2016, the IET had an event titled 9% is not enough, just talking about the fact that we only had 9% of women at the time. And I was thinking, it's great that we're doing this, but what about retaining the women that we have? I think the main issue around the percentages that we have is the culture within engineering organizations to retain these women, to encourage them to stay on. I've seen so many women join the industry so enthusiastically, and when they get to the middle part of their career, for various reasons, they drop off. One of those reasons is because sometimes it's about, people like to stereotype and say, okay, they've had children and they want to look after the children, but generally it's because they haven't had a really good working environment, and now they've kind of reevaluated things and thought, well, I don't want to go back to that, so I'm not going back. The other reason is because they haven't ever really felt like they were included. So sense of belonging in the industry means that a lot of women at a point decide that, I need to go and do something else that is more inspiring, or I need to do something where I can speak up and not be ignored, and then someone else speaks up and be listened to of the same idea that I had in the first place. So you know, as much as we talk about encouraging girls and stuff like that, you know, I'm all for that, but I'm more for ensuring that the culture within engineering organizations change to allow women to thrive, and that way naturally more women will stay in engineering and more women will come to engineering because it will become the norm. So yeah, that's my, I'll get off my soapbox now, but that's I'm really about the culture within engineering organizations changing to allow women to thrive.
That's really interesting. So very much focusing on that inclusion part of the journey, which I guess also expands into other aspects of diversity as well. You know, the same basic principles of respect and dignity for one another apply irrespective of who you're talking to or encouraging. Okay, so let me just move back to the other end of that spectrum though. So the retention and the inclusion part is obviously absolutely essential. But we still know that not enough women are taking up, or girls are taking up the STEM subjects, particularly engineering and physics. Jenny, let me bring you in here because you've got some experience that might be relevant here. What's going wrong? How can we change that? And you know, we've been talking about it for so long. What way? You know, is this something that's just always going to be?
I mean, I think one of the issues is that, in the main, especially if you're looking at a university route, then physics is a prerequisite for most courses. To not all courses now. That is starting to change, and there are a few sort of more radical, groundbreaking courses that aren't requiring physics as an entry point specifically to try and increase participation of women. But I think the you know, the percentage of the cohorts taking A-level physics, I think it's been at 20% female for forever. So that's obviously a very hard thing to change. It, you know, it's partly to do with what schools offer physics. I guess what schools offer triple science is the precursor to going into physics, and teaching staff, you know, feeling comfortable teaching it. There's a whole range of issues, but I think, you know, especially the climate we're living in now, where you have the university route, but you also have a much more strengthened apprenticeship route, degree apprenticeship route into professions like engineering. That's opening up new possibilities, and I think one of the key issues is how the information about potential career pathways can reach the people that it needs to get to. I mean, this touches back onto what Chloe was saying earlier, that unless you have family connection or a big company on your doorstep, or a particularly enlightened teacher in your school, engineering may never even get onto your radar as an option that you could consider. So I think one of the things that you know, this is something that we can look at as an organisation, but the industry as a whole and the, you know, the professional bodies and other support organisations that exist in engineering can do a lot to try to make pathways more varied, more flexible, but also more transparent, so that it's not such a daunting hurdle to come into the profession from wherever you start. I mean, I do think that I think there's something like 35 professional engineering institutions looking at their own discipline. I mean, we do make it incredibly hard and complex for people who want to be engineers to navigate into the profession. So, and I think if you're placing that sort of barrier in addition to the perception barriers and the stereotypes that exist around people that aren't white and male coming into this profession, then it's just cutting off opportunities for those individuals and cutting off the opportunity that the industry is losing as well, you know, from that diversity of thought and range of perspectives that could come in.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, it's difficult not to talk about stereotypes in this, but there's a lot of work about when women apply for a job, they look at all the things they can't do rather than things they can do, and that perhaps puts them off applying. I think perhaps the same is true in physics, you know, that my daughter, you know, doesn't understand 100% of her physics course at the moment, so therefore she wants to quit. She, you know, doesn't get it, whereas maybe others would be a little bit more accommodating. Maybe boys would be, oh well, I know most of it, I just don't know that, but I'll just carry on. So there's something there as well. Can I
sorry, I was just gonna, if I could just say,
do.
you know, because it's really interesting to explore this motivation aspect of what it's about, because, you know, female participation in healthcare and as doctors is really high. You know, that's a really difficult area to work in, you know, challenging, you know, in lots of ways. Just actually the work environment is very challenging, but what is the motivation then to overcome the challenge? Why does it attract someone? Is it because it's such a worthwhile profession and seen as and is part of it? You know, the value proposition we need to think about is inspiring that motivation about building the world better and cleaner and achieving net zero. I don't know, what?
Yeah, I mean, well, other people are thinking, I think that the net zero kind of future creates a huge opportunity, I think, because it's something that I think young people generally feel quite strongly about, and it doesn't differentiate between genders, or I think it allows people to feel that they're adding back in some way. What do other people? Yeah, Chi, you've got your hand up there.
I also think it's very dependent on our generation. So our generation want to be lucrative. They want to feel as though what they're doing is rewarding at the end of the day, and that they're able to spend their money and do side hustles and businesses. So in that retrospect, if I'm seeing, so let's say media right now is the best platform for our generation. If I'm seeing what life looks like as an engineer, I can relate to what it means to be an engineer. If I don't know what that looks like visibly speaking, I wouldn't want to be an engineer. I think there's such a huge gap in terms of what we're instructed or told as to what an engineer looks like. I was told you're not going to be in the office environment. You're not going to be a consultant. You are going to be on site with a hard top, safety gear, PPE, and that's what an engineer looks like, actually building with bricks, rather than actually doing the design calculations in the back and enjoying modeling and analysis. I wasn't told that. I had to have a mentor to allow me to understand what it looks like to be an engineer. Nowadays, in our generation, we're very into TikTok videos, life as a real estate agent, life as an engineer, and that's what creates visibility. That's what creates this kind of relationship or an ability to relate to that career path. If I'm not seeing that, it looks like it's so distant and so complex and so beyond my understanding that I wouldn't want to go into that field.
Okay. So I think, sorry. I got a couple of hands up there. I just wanted to, because it's very relevant to Chloe. Actually, I'd just like to bring Chloe in there. You've done some stuff in this space, haven't you, in terms of social media and promotion of alternative perspectives and using social media to help. Do you want to just explain what you've been doing?
So yeah, I am really big on my social media, just explaining that I basically came from nothing, no experience, no background, no help, and it is possible. I'd like to point out the motivation factor of it. Every person is different. So you give two people the exact same opportunities, the exact same everything, and each outcome will be different, because one might try a little harder, one might think that they don't have to try that hard because they have certain other things, but everybody's different. So it all comes down to how much you want something. So if I go to a school and I do a talk or something, I say, you really want a new pair of trainers, so you're going to save up pocket money to get it. And that's materialistic things that you don't realise until you mature and things like that. But it's all about what you want out of life. If you're not willing to put the work in, don't expect anything back.
Oh, that's great, and we'll get you to share the details of things for us to follow at the end of this session, Chloe. Matt, let's bring you in.
Yeah, I mean, I just coming at it from a slightly different perspective. I challenge whether we're doing enough at early enough stages. So I have two small children, and I've had some recent insight into this, and I think yes, there is a disconnect between the number of young women studying STEM subjects at school and then progressing into STEM careers. And that's an issue. And that's towards the latter end of their initial education. But we know that actually there's an issue at primary, so it's key stage 1. And we talk about stereotypes, we talk about learned behaviors. I live in what I like to think is a very progressive household where we expose, I have a young boy and I have a young girl, and we try to expose them to exactly the same things. Okay, and stereotypes don't exist within the house, but they're coming back into the house now with those stereotypes established. So something is happening either socially or academically, or even something isn't happening academically. And we tend to, and it comes down to resources, and it always does. You know, we tend to focus a lot of our attention at further education, or the stage just before that, actually. So can we address that disconnect? Can we, you know, if there are girls studying STEM subjects in their GCSEs and A-levels, can we convert them? And that's part of the fight. But actually, we need to bring more from key stage 1 into key stage 2 to actually make it a more equal playing field at that stage. And I know we do it because of resource and capability, but I think more needs to be done when children are, you know, within those early years, foundation stages of their education.
Obviously, it's all a pipeline, isn't it? It flows through. If you cut off some or hard baked in some views by that stage, it's very difficult to reverse it. Then you're undoing rather than doing. Jenny, did you wanted to come in here as well? Yeah, well, it's I think it connects back to the, you know, the ways of accessing the profession as well, because I recognise what Matt's describing, and I know that is an issue, but I think there's also a question about how our entry points into engineering as a profession can be cut off if you've made the wrong choice inadvertently earlier on in your career. And I think having recovery routes is equally as important in case people aren't exposed to just to the right information or role models or champions to seed the idea of engineering in their mind early on. But I think if you have a way that people can come into the profession later on, perhaps not having made the accepted traditional choices to come into engineering, then it means it's still an option. And Chloe, you said at the beginning that you didn't discover welding as an option really until you were 22, which is picking up what Matt says, that's quite a late decision, but the route was still there for you from the circumstance you were in. And I think if we can, and I don't mean we as ICTB, I mean we as the whole engineering profession can make changing tack easier, then I think that will go a long way to helping things. That's great. Chris, did you want to come in, or have you changed your mind?
No, I think I've changed my mind there.
You've changed your mind, that's fine. Right, conscious of time, so I'm going to move towards our final question now, because that's the problem with a large panel, is that you want to discuss in more and more detail. But in our closing question, I'd just like you to think back to your 12-year-old self, or maybe a 12-year-old girl, if that's an easier thing to associate with. What advice would you give to somebody at 12? I guess picking up like kind of the typical decision point for people when they're starting to select GCSEs and that kind of thing. What advice would you give them in terms of opportunities and routes into our sector? Let's start off with you, Chris.
I really wish you wouldn't have started that one off with me. I mean, that's really tough because, I look back as a piece of regret for me that I closed myself off very quickly by not really pursuing the STEM subjects at school. So, and as a result, I shut a whole load of doors really early on in my life. So I suppose what my 12-year-old self would be, you don't really know what you want to do at 12, but don't shut doors unnecessarily. So keep your options open, because I think Chloe made the point earlier about choice and understanding the whole choice bit, and she's absolutely right. I think we need to be able to have choices. So yeah, don't close doors off.
Okay, thank you. Nikkei.
Well, I think I decided to be an engineer. Well, I didn't know it was engineering when I was 8, but I sort of knew what I wanted to do. So I think what I just said to my 12-year-old self is relax. You have a whole lifetime ahead of you to make decisions, and you have so many opportunities to explore so many things. So just take it all in, and it doesn't matter that your friends think you're weird or geeky or whatever. Just be who you are, and just be who you are, because I think the opposite thing of, oh gosh, you're just too focused, and it's helped. So just relax. As a 12-year-old, just relax. It'll all come together. Just be open.
That's great, thank you. Chloe.
Well, my 12-year-old self would not have listened to me. But just to again touch on the fact that just don't have too much pressure on yourself. You've got a long time to make these important decisions. And another thing I wanted to say, went back onto a different subject, but go into the boys' clothes section, because they have a lot more opportunities printed on T-shirts than girls' clothes with flowers and makeup. But boys get NASA T-shirts. They got like Digger. Do you know what I mean? It's just the way it's advertised, like girls should have this and boys should have that, and it shouldn't be like that.
I think that's a really important point. You were asking, Matt, where does this influence come from? It comes from exactly those kind of things, like what chance do we have, really? Yeah, Matt, let's bring you in there.
Listen more, or listen sooner. I think, and I'd go back to the first question you asked me, is why I'm here. And I think it's probably in the last 4 years since I joined the ECITB, I've been given an opportunity by association of listening to people who have actually been on this journey for a hell of a long time. And you don't, as a 12-year-old boy, understand your privilege or understand that equity isn't a thing in the real world. And we know that progress is made through conversation and debate. That can't happen until you start listening. So I'd probably say, if you want to be, to a younger me, if you want to do something good, start listening a bit sooner.
That's great, thank you. Chi?
I would say be inquisitive. Ask as many questions as you want. I mean, that opens the doors to everything. I narrowly escaped being a doctor at one point. My older sister is actually a plastic surgeon. And I remember she was always just giving me all these gifts with little doctor kits and things like that. And then my dad would give me like chemistry science kits where I would like play Claydon and different things at home. And because I was given all these, tools, I would get really excited about them, and I'd ask questions. Why is it fizzing? Why is it doing that? And then it became more interesting to me because obviously reading a science textbook isn't always very exciting. But watching perhaps a program or doing activities or going to the science museum is far more engaging, and it makes me more, it makes me more excited about being in science. So I would say that ask as many questions as possible, going to as many science related, places as possible is great as well, and receiving gifts, little doctor's kits and science kits makes you want to understand more. It looks more realistic, and yeah, you start to appreciate science.
That's great. And I think Jenny is the last one.
Yes, it makes me smile because I also have a girl and a boy, and I gave my daughter, when she was 3, one of these Black & Decker toy workbenches to play with deliberately to try and break the stereotype. I think I would say have confidence. It'll be okay. Say yes to any opportunities that come your way. I think that's something I've tried to do, but I would say that. And also, don't worry about making mistakes. One thing about engineering is it's a huge profession. You can change direction. So I think there is no right answer, and everybody's path is different. So don't worry about getting it wrong the first time.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you know, I guess what I've just heard is the power of diversity, you know, well, a range of different perspectives, routes into the sector, viewpoints. And I think for me, the strongest message that's come out of that, and it's made me think actually that actually, you know, it's not one single path. You can go down and then come back. I think that idea of recovery routes, I think, is a really interesting one. You know, certain people are lucky enough to know where they want to go from, you know, from birth and just follow that direction doggedly. You know, Chloe's experience, I think, is probably more typical actually, in terms of people that stumble into careers and just accidentally find themselves into places, you know, and that's fine too. But I think what we need to do as a sector is make sure that we provide opportunities for those that come to that period of enlightenment a little bit later on. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone on the panel. I would have spent the rest of the day talking to you. It's been fascinating. Perhaps we can keep in touch. Chloe will find a way of making sure that your follow details are included in the in the video when it gets broadcast. And yeah, just thanks for your time this afternoon, and good luck in the next period of your careers. Thanks very much.
Thank you.